Welcome back to the Testing 123 podcast. As always, I'm Brett, joined by Lester. Lester, today we're talking about jobs. What they mean, why we have them, why we get them. Gonna be a lot of disagreement, and I'm gonna be throwing some heat coming your way. Some heat absolutely coming your way. I definitely have stronger opinions on this than maybe some people. And I would say my opinions are pretty simple on this whole idea. But we're going to break it down like we always do, and we'll talk about, of course, we're going to talk about where it comes from the Bible and the viewpoint from there. And then, we might get into God's will a little bit, and then just some practical things like we always try to do to like break it down so it's not always like, oh, this high-reaching idea that like is hard to understand. Before we jump in, I do want to hint at what we're doing next week, because next week's a good podcast. It's called Christianity Adjacent. And if you've heard of Kolob, you might know where we're going with it. So just a little hint at what we're doing next week. Going to be a good one. Lester, before we dive in and talk about this, anything you want to add?
No, I'm excited for this podcast and the next one. They're all exciting to me. I'm pumped, man.
I mean, who isn't excited for Collab? Am I right?
Collab,
Who isn't excited? All right, let's jump into this one. Let's get it moving. We're talking about work. We're talking about jobs. What that means for a Christian. I want you to kick it off. I want you to start us and kind of lead us through this one. And I'm going to kind of play the side. I'm going to just chip in when I want to. Okay?
Yeah, let's get it. So I think finding a job and employment is one of those big topics where like a lot of the times we as Christians we're like, what does God want for my life? Like how do I find a job? Where does God want me to work? Because I mean, it's important where you spend 40 hours, 50 hours of your week. Each week you're spending 40, 50 hours doing this thing. Like it better be something that like, you find purpose in, that God has a purpose for you in. So it's really important that we look at this from a biblical perspective and have some Christian considerations or theological considerations when we go to say like get a job. So before we go into the actual practical aspects of getting a job, though, I think it's important to understand what is work and the value and importance of work. And that starts in Genesis 2. I think we, as Christians, get this conception that, if Adam and Eve didn't sin, and specifically Adam, really, but that's a whole other topic. But if there was
throwing it on Adam, a guy, you're an Adam blamer, eh? Eve did nothing. Just throwing it on Adam.
She did nothing, but ultimately, whose responsibility is it anyway?
You heard it here first. Lester is anti-Adam. Well, I'll just keep it at that.
We often think like if they didn't sin, like I wouldn't have to work, right? We'd all just live in the garden. Everything would be awesome. We'd just pick fruit off the tree and like, oh my goodness, we just kind of. But that's not actually God's purpose. In Genesis 2, before the fall, so Genesis 2:15, it says, "The Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it." That's important right there. He says, literally, you are not to just gallivant about in the frolic in the garden like two children. No, he has a job in the garden, and his job is to be the garden keeper. He is to maintain that which God has created and make sure that it continues to reflect the glory that is its creator. So it's really important that we think of work in that way, where it's actually something that God ordained to give us purpose in life. Having work is a good thing. In fact, God himself does a whole lot of work before resting. And if you think about it a little bit further, if we are supposed to be the reflection of who God is, then wouldn't it logically follow then that we are also supposed to work? We have purpose, and our work gives us purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue the point that we should be working. Very pro, you should be working, and yeah, I mean, most people find purpose in their work. I maybe say most people because I mean, obviously, we work jobs that like we don't feel great about, or we, just to make ends meet, provide for the family, whatever it is. Um, we're gonna get to this later. I'm pretty. There's not much to say. I don't think anyone listening to this is going to be like, no, we shouldn't be working. I disagree. We should all be sitting around reading and studying. And I don't really know anyone in my life who has that point of view. And maybe I just need to branch out and find someone with that point of view. I think most people realize once you get a job, it's like, hey, this is really rewarding. There's a reason you do this. Like, yeah, okay, we get money to pay for our families and things we want to do, but it like when you work, there's a lot of reward in that. I don't think anyone is going to argue that. I'll leave it there. There's some points I'm going to add as we get through this, but I'll keep going, keep hitting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's important because I think it gives us a bit of a perspective shift when we think about work that way, to say like, oh, God actually desires for me to work and have a purpose. And when I work, I honor God. Now, we'll get into exactly how we do that in our work. But when we do it properly, our work is supposed to be honoring to God. It's a part of being obedient to God is work. And so when we think about it that way, then it's important then to have the correct perspective when going to look for employment, to have the correct framework when looking for employment. So really, ultimately, and if you're ready to move on, ultimately, the question of what job should I take or what should I do with my life with the 40 hours I'm supposed to be working, that question is ultimately a question of what is God's will for my life, right? Go ahead.
I was going to wait for you to finish your point, but it's just a small point. You can work more than 40 hours, Lester.
Oh, definitely.
Okay?
Yes.
It's not like
course.
God said, like, there will be a 40-hour work week, and that's what we shall work. Like that. Yeah, I would unphrase your statement of instead of supposed to be working as the average person works 40 hours.
Yes,
Many people work a lot more than 40 hours.
Or less.
Some people work less.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, when I say the 40-hour work week, I'm just saying I'm sure some of us work 50.
I'm just ragging on you for no reason. Obviously, you're just trying to express the idea that work is important. We should spend a good percentage of our time doing it, right? Like the point being made there is, it's a good thing to work throughout your days, not sit around and twiddle your thumbs. It's good to be working most of the days. That's the point.
Yeah, God didn't make us to gallivant in a garden and frolic about.
Yeah, that's a good word. Good word there.
Yeah, I mean, God gave Adam and Eve purpose, and we talked about that to work the garden. The difference with sin is, of course, by the sweat of your brow. So now it becomes this very difficult thing, but still, work is relevant. And I mean, we can talk about the theology of sin another time. That goes deep, and it's not a rabbit hole I want to get into. What I want to get into right now is the will of God, because ultimately that's the big question here, right? What is God's will for me when I go to find a job?
I think this topic really isn't like what job should I go get. Like, can I work for this company? Can I work for that company? I'm gonna tell you, go get the freaking job. That's what you should do. Just get the job. Like that. Don't. Oh, I don't know if I should work this company. Go get the job. Okay. But I think more people are asking the question like, okay, but how do I know what I'm about to do or the company I'm working for is where God wants me?
Exactly.
Right? That's the question people are asking. Like, I have a job. Maybe I have a job or maybe I don't. If you're younger and you're looking for a job, Brett's straight up advice is just get a job. But I think more importantly, you're asking, how do I know I'm following God's will by getting this job or getting this education that leads me towards this job? Like, am I just doing this because I want to do this? This is something myself wants to do? Or is this something like, am I following God's path for me? That's the real question we're answering here, not should I have a job? The answer to should I have a job is yes. Go get a freaking job.
Absolutely get a job. Yeah, and we talked about how that is important. Anyway, so there's a very important distinction when it comes to God's will. In the Bible, there are two different, in the Greek, there are two different words that they use to describe God's will that we end up just kind of translating into the one word, God's will. So the first type of God's will is his sovereign, efficacious will. Big word, sovereign, efficacious will. And that really means like things like when he says, let there be light, and there is. Like, it's not like he says, let there be light, and the light goes, not today, maybe tomorrow. When he says something like that, and it's his sovereign, efficacious will, then it happens every single time. And then that's juxtaposed or contrasted against his preceptive will. So his preceptive will, so God's precepts or commands are things like remember the Sabbath and thou shalt remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Those are preceptive. These are God's precepts. And as Adam and Eve demonstrate, and as you and I always demonstrate, we fall short in accomplishing God's will for our life, even though he wants us to do it. Oftentimes, Brett, Lester, Anthony, Adam, Eve, we fall short in accomplishing God's will.
Yeah, the distinction is the first will is something that will happen, is going to happen. There's no way around it. It will happen. Little throw in the will and the will. Yeah. The second is something that should happen.
Exactly.
That's the difference. The humans can be involved in both. The first is something that will happen, whether you want it or not. The second is something that should happen. So the Sabbath is just a light example. Like, hey, like God says, keep the Sabbath. I like. It's not like I'm not forced. Like, it's not like I involuntarily have to keep the Sabbath. Like, it will just happen, right? Like, I can choose to do whatever. I want. We choose Sunday for the Sabbath. I mean, other people choose Saturday and stuff like that. I can choose that. We'll get into that part next week, eh? But that's the distinction. Is something that will happen and something that should happen.
Yeah, exactly. And then when it comes to God's sovereign, efficacious will, so the things that are definitely going to happen, there are two types. So there's his revealed will, and then there's his secret will. So his revealed will is stuff like, you shall remember the 10 Commandments and keep them, like that, like very obviously. Oh yeah, we're gonna do this. Sorry, it's his preceptive will, and then there's his secret will. These are two things that fall under his preceptive will and his secret will, where it's kind of like if you ask me, like, Lester, what is God's will for my life? I'm gonna be like, I don't know. Like, how am I supposed to know what is God's will for your life? In fact, it's difficult for you to discern because it takes time for you to actually prayerfully discern those things. And what's important when it comes to discerning God's secret will or hidden will for your life is understanding that we have to wait on God's timing. It's really important to seek counsel, consider prayerfully, be steeped in the Word, to have the Word dwell richly in our hearts. Those are the three ingredients to understanding God's will for my life. And then from there, we can talk about some of the even more practical implications. But I'm sure you want to say something here.
No, I mean, you explained it well. It do not murder would be his revealed will. It's in the 10 Commandments. It's something that it's a commandment we can follow. So easy. When you get into his hidden will or his secret will, you're getting into stuff like, I would say, that regards more to the individual.
Exactly.
Right? Like, a lot of God's revealed will is to the community of, like, Christians. Like, hey, this is the kind of, here's a guideline. Whereas hidden will or secret will, however, either term you want to use there, is like, hey, individually, what do I do? Like, exactly. I think I wouldn't be asking God, like, hey, what do you want Lester to do with his life? Now, I could be speaking, like, I would help you. I would pray on your behalf and be like, reveal to Lester if he's doing something right or wrong. And you always bring people into your life when you're making a big decision for prayer, but it's more like an individual. God, am I following your path? Am I like pursuing you? Is this where you want me to go, or am I going somewhere else? And he'll speak through many different facets too. That's the other side of this. Like we'll touch on that, how he speaks to us, but that's how I would distinct it if I was listening. I'd just be like, like more individual things, like what I personally am called to do.
Yeah, exactly. The example I love to use is like the Great Commission, right? We all know like we are to go make disciples, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. Well, like, yes, I know to do that, but it also could be God's will for me to go to McDonald's on Saturday at 6:00, and there'll be this guy there. Like, it's possible, right?
Yeah, you don't know the Great Commission is an overview of that will. But then he might be calling Lester, like he has, to be in ministry, to be a pastor. And that's how he will fulfill the Great Commission. Whereas he can call me, like, I just work in business world. Like, I'm supposed to witness there, right? And that's more the hidden will in our lives. Yeah. But we're still both following the Great Commission. It's not like we're like one of us is blowing it off. It's just we're doing where God has called us individually.
Exactly. Yeah. And so going on from there, the idea here is that God has called us to seek righteousness. That's the big, big umbrella. In our work, God has called us to seek righteousness, to seek Him first. And then, whatever you do, all of that will be in line with His purpose and His will. So, a helpful framework that R.C. Sproul likes to use, as a famous theologian, he likes to use is these two circles. So on the one circle, on the left, there's a circle called job description. And then on the right, completely not touching job description, there's another circle that says motivated ability pattern. So what is a motivated ability pattern? First, motivated. So something that you're motivated to do. So like, I love playing team sports. I love playing softball. Brett loves golf, maybe. Those are things. Yeah, those are things that we are motivated to do. But then it comes ability. So Brett and I don't have the ability to play those things at a professional level. So
give me some time, Lester. Give me some time, okay?
Yeah,
I'm just really getting my swing down here.
Yeah, maybe you're just crushing it and you're birdieing par fives all day long. Just
you don't play a lot of golf, do you?
Not a ton. No, honestly, not a ton.
Just crushing it, birdieing par fives. I love that. No, continue. I got you off track there, but continue.
Whatever you're doing, super great at, or really motivated to do. I'm sure there are passions that we are super motivated to do that are not really in our ability. So like, I love playing softball, but am I ever going to play softball at that professional level? Believe it or not, there is professional slow pitch softball. These guys are crushing it like 450 feet. Like, it's ridiculous. I'm just never going to be that guy. And so your motivated ability pattern is something that you are motivated to do, that you can do, and you see that as a pattern in your life. Now, when those two circles, your motivated ability pattern and your job description, overlap, you want to make those two circles overlap as much as possible. God has clearly given you motivations and abilities, and He wants you to use them in your job description. And so that's the way that we can go about looking for a job and finding employment in a way that honors God, by using the things that He's gifted us with.
Yeah, I mean, I would just kind of add to that would be, don't think of it as like, I like a sport or I like to do this, therefore I should find a job. Like, I love to golf, and I golf too much, right? Like, I golf all the time. But just because I love to golf doesn't mean I'm going to get a job like on a golf course, right?
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And now I'm motivated to do that, and maybe God's maybe he's calling me there, so maybe I should join the tour. Maybe I should really work for it. But
Just talk yourself.
I'm doing it. I'm quitting my job. But I would look at more your motivations or things you're like, not just the things you're passionate about, but like how you perform and like who you are, right? I know some people who just like love to be around people. That's a common, right? They just love to be around people. So they're going to look for a job that's relational, like a really relational job, right? Yeah. They're always with people. They're, maybe networking a ton, mingling a lot. Like, it's not like, oh, I like to play baseball, therefore I have to work in the baseball industry. It's I love people, therefore I want to be around people all the time at job. Whereas other people, if you look like an engineer, those are people who are really focused on things. They like if you like scale engineers, most people who get an engineering degree are so much more focused on things rather than people. Yeah. And when I mean things, I mean like data and like how things work. And so that's what they're passionate about. They're passionate about like discovering that, and so then they find a job engineering that works with that, and then that could be how God calls you to something. I wouldn't look at it as like, I really like to skate and play hockey. I got a coach in the NHL. Like that's
got to.
Yeah, like maybe I would look at it more like, what are you passionate about on like maybe even a more like a deeper level? Are you passionate about people? Are you passionate about things? Are you passionate like that's how I would look at it, not maybe like what do I do in my spare time? But I get your point. That I just kind of expanding on that idea of like, if you're passionate about people, go get a job where you're around people, because God's probably made you passionate about people for a reason, so you can affect people's lives, right?
Exactly.
So, that's how I would subcategorize that whole idea.
Yeah, you love like playing hockey or whatever. What is it that you love about playing hockey? Is it the teamwork? Is it whatever it is? So zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture of the thing that you love doing. And I mean, also, you do have to consider your ability, right? I mean, maybe you are Connor McDavid. You love hockey and you can play
sick
hockey.
at it. Yeah.
So maybe you're crushing it. Let's do it.
I like that term though. Zoom out a little bit. Like, see why you like that thing. Like normally when people are really into sports or art or music, there's if you zoom out, you see why you're into that. It's not just like the sport. It's actually like, you said, I really love to be on the team. I just love a team atmosphere. So find a job that has a team atmosphere. It doesn't have to be in sports. Find a job where you can be part of a team. I really love just like the data and really looking at individual things, and find a job that does that. Some people love numbers. Get an accounting job. That's awesome, right? Like that's just something you can do. So I like that idea of zoom out. Don't just look at it like, oh, I like to play baseball, so why do you like to play? Like, what are the little things that are motivating you towards that? That's what I would have. Good point, exactly. Lester. Good point.
Thank you. I put some effort into this one. So that's one of the things that helps us look at jobs in a way that will honor God when we use the gifts that we have. The other thing that I wanted to draw our attention to is that God intends for us to be his salt and light in the workplace. And so when you go into a workplace, it's important to see where God is calling you or who God is calling you to minister to. And that's a really big deal, because if you're going to spend the amount of time that you spent, Brett was saying that it's not always 40 hours. So whatever amount of time that you spend...
Wow, I didn't know I sounded like that.
Whatever amount of time you spend with your coworkers is a very significant portion of your week or day. And how is God calling you to be a witness to these people? We were recently talking about how sometimes people around us don't know that we're Christian, and that is actually a problem. Like, if somebody works with me for like 8 hours a day and they don't know that I'm a Christian, well,
if someone works with you and they don't know they're a Christian, they also don't know where they work. So
I mean, my job is a little different than maybe somebody else's job, but
from someone who doesn't work in a church and is like, the base requirement is, hey, you got to believe in God to work here. Yes, when you're around people, I mean, we always talk about it. They should see a difference and they should know a difference. But like, when we're talking about like getting a job and line a job with your skill sets, and that's how you can glorify God, I mean, that's all great. But like, I always reserve back to just get a job first before you get picky about your work. Maybe just get a job And then you maybe move on to something that you're more passionate about. I think too many people try to go right to the like passionate thing. They're like, oh, I have to be passionate about it and I can't take a job if it doesn't fit my skill set. No, just get the job. Just take a job and work your way up. Like I don't like using that as an excuse. Like, you know what, I got a great job offer, but it's just not like what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to wait, then wait. But most people just get the job, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, there is nothing wrong with doing something else for a little bit. Like, there is nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing to work, like we talked about previously.
Yeah. But I'll continue on my thought there. With getting the job, yeah, like once you're in that job, God can use you at any job.
Yeah.
Whether you're super passionate about what you do or you're just doing it to meet what you need to do to live, like your means, that's fine, but still be a Christian in that job. Don't just show up and be a zombie just because you don't love the job or something. You can God still use you in that job, right? Like there's still amazing places to witness, and those are the people who are going to like respond probably the best because those are the people who you're going to build a relationship with. And we always talk on this. Like I don't know how many times we've said in our talks, like, hey, you know what's really effective when you're a Christian? Building relationships with people.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's what God did for us. Like that's Jesus shows, like, hey, build relationships. Don't just go scream on the street. We've said that many times. I mean, unless you're called to, I don't know. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. But build relationships, and guess who you can build relationships? Your coworkers. That's an easy one. You're together probably most of the day. I mean, some jobs are different. I never see my coworkers because we're in sales and I'm always traveling, right? Like that's different. But I there's still the people I talk to at least, every couple of times a week. Just build a relationship and then let them know, like, hey, this is how I live my life, right?
Yeah, one of the easy ways I used to work in the secular field. One of the easy ways I found
secular field, he says,
secular
field.
whatever.
I worked in the
so I used to not work at the church. So one of the easiest ways that I found to segue into letting people know that this is what I believe is, hey, what'd you do this weekend?
Yeah, hey, I went to church. Oh, you go to church? Yeah, I'm a Christian.
Yes,
like, it can happen that quickly. I mean, you could also just throw a Bible at them and yell, I'm a Christian! I don't know how well that's going to work, but hey, at least they know, right?
Just wear Christian t-shirts every day.
Totally
But yeah, it's just one of the easiest things that you can do to get there. Anyway, one caveat to all of this is, yes, go get a job, but I don't just get a job because you want money. This is probably the Asian in me talking, but I know so many Asian parents that push their children so hard to become doctors. It's ridiculous. And once they get there, they have no passion for this. They're here for the prestige and they're here for the money. And what's really funny about it is I was listening to Ronnie Chang. He's this comedian, Asian comedian. He was saying, like, Asian parents, they want their kids to be doctors so bad. But what's the number one thing that Asian aunties and uncles don't go to when they have an illness? The doctor. They hate going to the Western doctors. This is a real thing. They hate going to Western doctors. Why? Because they're just there to take your money. They just want your money. So why do you become a doctor? For the money. But why do you not go to the doctor? Because
the money.
Money.
I disagree with you on that.
Sure.
I obviously I'm not saying worship money and just pursue money in your life. But let's just take it as a prerequisite that you're already pursuing after God. I don't think there's a problem with choosing a job for a good paycheck.
Oh, I'm not saying if it offers don't take a job because of the money. I'm saying don't only chase money. Like if your sole motivation for entering a field is, I'm just going to get so much money in this field. Don't.
Yeah, well, if your only motivation to get money, don't be a doctor. You can make way more money in way other places. I think I've said that on the podcast too. I think I've mentioned that 3 or 4 times. You can make way more money being in a lot of other places in life than a doctor. Doctor's just secure. You just have a secure paycheck. That's what that is.
Yeah.
I still, if the prerequisite, the people, we're talking from the perspective of, hey, I want to pursue God and I want to follow His will. If that's your number, if you're already thinking like that, I don't think it's wrong to go get a job because it pays well. You need to provide for your family, go get a job that pays well.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have that prerequisite that you're pursuing God and then it's just I want money, you're probably not a Christian.
Yeah.
And I'm not calling people out. I'm not okay, yeah, that's dangerous to say. I'm not saying you're not
You
I
need to
don't want to.
reevaluate your framework there.
Yes, you need to reevaluate what you're valuing the most.
Yeah.
Like, where's your value? I'm saying if you value following God's will, number one, then go get a job that pays well. Awesome. Amazing.
Yeah.
Go be
So-
successful. I am so pro making money as a Christian. I think way more Christians should be in the business world and should be successful. But obviously, I'm saying your prerequisite to that to be is like I'm following God,
Yes.
right? So maybe we're not disagreeing. I'm just saying like I don't want to come across as hey, like don't make a lot of money because that is a thing. There's a lot of there's a lot of Christians who are like you shouldn't make a lot of money as a Christian. Like I've met people and I'm like, what are you talking about? Why not?
Yeah. But
like,
there's nothing wrong with making money.
Unless
Absolutely.
you're lusting and pursuing after it. And it's just like all I care about is money. That's a different issue though.
Yeah.
Right? So I
so
need people to know you can go make a great living and make a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you're following God, awesome. Great for you.
And let's be honest. Money really, does help a lot when we go to do church ministry. The church, as it stands, our church, Springvale, we need money to make that ministry go. That's just the reality. And so there is nothing inherently wrong with money. I think sometimes we get this attitude like, oh, if we're trying to make more money, like it's kind of somehow like greedy or sinful. And that's not the case.
It's portrayed. Sometimes it's portrayed to people as like, oh, if you make more money or ask for more money or go for a job that pays more money, then you're just after it. You're just like greedy. Yeah. But I'm just like openly saying I don't think that's true. I think if you're pursuing God and then you're in an industry that you can be successful, you own a business. Yeah. Grow your business. Don't not grow your business because you don't want to make more money. Like that's just crazy to me. But that is a thought that's in the church. That's a legit thought where it's like people who make a lot of money, like they're not pursuing the right things. And sometimes Christians who make a lot of money are looked like down upon. They're like, oh, look at them. Like, and I just think that's like something. I think it's leaving the church more and more. I think more people are realizing, go be successful in business, go be a doctor, go do this. But there is still a stigma of like, oh, if you make a lot of money, then like you're pursuing the wrong things, and that's not true. Unless you are pursuing the wrong things, then that would become true. But yeah, like you said, money helps the church. Yes. And there's people I know who are like great people of God, and they've been called to support the church in an amazing financial way.
And so that's a wonderful blessing for the church when we, as Christians, are successful, and then we use that financial blessing to forward God's kingdom through ministry. That's a wonderful thing. All right,
we're getting down on money. We're getting down on money trail right now. We've been talking too much money. Let's get back to the point you wanted to make.
It's the framework. So, am I seeking God first? Am I seeking His righteousness first? Then going to be successful in whatever I'm pursuing or whatever my job is, or am I just trying to do well at the job and make the maximum amount of money, and then God is the afterthought? Those are the things that we have to reflect on and really evaluate in our life. What is my prime directive, or what is my priority when it comes to this job? Is it God or is it me?
That's everything in life, though. Am I doing this for myself or am I doing this for God? That's just that's not even job related. That's like, am I going here to do like literally every decision you make? Am I doing this for myself or am I doing this for God? And that is a constant battle where you're going to lose a lot because there's a lot of times you're going to be like, I straight up just did that for myself.
Dating, large purchases, all those things. Yeah.
Did you say dating then large purchases as if dating was a large purchase?
Comma, unrelated item, large purchases.
Okay, yeah.
Live. Unrelated.
Semantics matter, Lester.
But I will say, when I was dating, like, the money. Anyway, I'm not going to go down this dating.
Don't go there.
We're not going there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, a couple things to avoid when getting a job. There are certain jobs that preclude you from righteousness. That's just a fact.
Oh, interesting. Maybe big disagreement here. Give me one.
Sex
other than murderer and child trafficker.
Right, child trafficking. So I'm saying, like, don't just go out and get the first. sex work. Let's not do that. You know what I mean? So there are certain jobs, and I think for the vast majority of us, we aren't even gonna consider
I
those
don't
kinds
think
of jobs.
anyone who hear. I don't
But
think all 3 people who hear this podcast are like, I gotta get a job. The only offer I have is sex worker. Like, I don't think we're dealing with a very
niche.
affluent crowd and a very like a crowd that probably like a lot of people are going to be university educated or high school educated and have some skills. I doubt sex workers like.
So
top of
I'm
the
taking
list.
I'm taking the extreme.
Okay, you're playing this to the ultimate extreme.
Yeah,
Okay.
the ultimate extreme, right? Everybody knows, but let's make it a little more gray. Abortionist.
Is
Abortion.
that a job?
Yeah,
That's just a doctor who does abortions, not an abortionist.
a doctor who pretty much only a gynecologist specifically who only really does abortions.
But are they referred to as an abortionist?
Not normally, but essentially most of the time, like
Yeah.
75, 80% of their job is abortions. Let's right now we're getting a little more like, nah, don't do that. What about like the abortionist nurse? Like, see where I'm going. Like, there are some jobs that like, let's. So really think about like. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think the point you're making is if you're doing a job that goes against God's revealed will, like do not murder,
Yes,
do not
exactly.
steal, don't
So
like.
what comes first there is exactly what you're saying is, does this job violate God's revealed will? That's exactly where I was going with that. The question you ought to ask yourself is, when considering a job, does this job preclude me from following God's revealed will? If it does, probably shouldn't be doing that one.
There are very few jobs out there that people are going to have to worry about, and there are very few people who will have this decision, like in our crowd that we're talking
Yes.
to. Obviously, you're taking it to the extreme because you're trying
Yes.
to prove a point. So it is a good point to make. Probably not a point that most people here are going to be like, oh, no way. The abortion one I'll give you, that's actually a legit that would be a legit question to ask. The sex worker one, I mean, there's some biblical reference to, prostitutes and stuff that you could probably have a heated debate. I'm not saying it's biblical, not at all. Did I say that? That's not the point. But I don't think like the point I'm making there is like God doesn't love you less if you like go into a job like that, but you're now not following His will and you're disconnecting from Him. Is what you're doing. You're putting a gap between you and Him. So maybe don't do that. Maybe follow Him. Right? It's kind of the point, right?
God is not loving what you're doing there.
No.
So the other side of the coin there is though that like we start thinking like, oh, this job precludes me from say I want to work for Esso. Like I'm just going to be the gas attendant at the gas station.
Oh, I thought you could say
now like, oh, this oil comes from BP. BP like they made these huge spills and that is like destroying God's creation. Whatever that, or you're working for BP directly and like they destroyed the environment or whatever, and that's God's creation. I think that we also have to not take that kind of thinking to the extreme either, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying don't be like, oh, this company made a mistake once and now I can't work for them, or unless you're pigeonholing yourself into like, there's no one to work for.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can't say like, oh, Walmart did this one thing one time, or like Walmart supports this business also, and so like I can't possibly work for Walmart. Like I have to go to Chick-fil-A or something. Like
I mean, Chick-fil-A, good company to work for.
Great company to work for, but I'm saying working at Walmart is not a problem. And like they have in the past, even so, for example, a company I like to buy their products, Nike, they have supported some causes that I don't agree with. But if I buy a Nike product, am I sinning? No. And if you work for Nike, are you directly sinning? No. No, you're not. You're not sinning by designing shoes for Nike. That's
I mean, the point you're making is unless you're the guy like actively involved in supporting things that are
doing the things that are
doing the things, you can. the stress would be get the job, get working, and use your ability for God. Like, I think sometimes we think like, oh, I can't go work for that company because they're like, they have a bad culture or something. But sometimes the best thing to do is go to a company where like maybe they have some ups and downs, and then be a light.
Mm-hmm.
Like, be the light. And Jesus gets all his disciples are like, why are you hanging out with this like crowd? The Pharisees come and they're like, why are you hanging out with this rough crowd? And he's like, who needs my help? The person in the synagogue or the person like at the party? They need to know this more than anyone. So he's saying like you need to go and be with people. You can't just exclude ourselves from the world, saying like, well, I don't know that company made a mistake once. Like, I don't know. No, go work there. Be a light. Be responsible for your actions. Is the point you're saying there? It's
Exactly.
like you're responsible to go be a light for Christ wherever you are in life. So if you're working for a company and they make a mistake or they do something wrong, be the person who's responsible for your actions. Right? Be the person who's the light in the company. Now, if you're the one ordering like the murdering of ducks and kids and stuff like that, maybe don't be that person. But like,
Be careful here, though. I'm sure there are some people who work on farms that actually do.
oh
order
yeah, no, that's totally different. I don't mean that. I don't mean that. I duck hunt, so that's not even like the same thing. I'm saying like, don't be the guy who's murdering children. Maybe like the,
Yes.
you know what I mean. Like, be the light where you are, wherever you can get the job. Be the light. I think is the point. I'm not telling anybody to not take any job or take a job. That's the thing I wanted to stress is like, we're not saying like you can work here. Like Lester, pull up the list of where you can work and where you can't work. That's not what it is. It's more important to be a light at your job, whatever your job is.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are the two things that I would say you need to make sure that you have straight in your head. Does this job preclude me from God's revealed will? Because there are some jobs that do. Just be careful. And then let's not take that to the extreme where like you're over analyzing every single little thing that the company has done in the past or whatever your employer has done in the past. So outside of those two things, get the job. Work. Honor God in your vocation. That is an honorable thing to do. It's an act of worship when we work well.
I'm surprised. I thought you were going to take this topic a little bit more like extreme and be like, hey, like almost the point of don't work this job because, but I like where you finished it with, what, if you're following God's will to the best of your ability, if you know it's wrong, don't do it. If you know it, if you know God's calling you there, do your best to do it, which means do it. But, like, don't overthink it is the point. Yeah, like, go get a job. Exactly. And obviously the dream is to have a job that you're passionate about what you're doing. You're a witness to God. And that's the goal. But also for a lot of young people, that's not going to happen. Job one. That's not going to happen until you're in your late 40s and 50s when you have the experience. And now you can move into roles where you can be super impactful. Like, I think the other side too is some people, young people, get out of university and they're like, I want to do this job and I want to change the world. And the world looks at them and goes, why should we listen to you? You have no experience.
Yeah.
Right? Like why would any company listen to what you want to do? So you have two options: to start your own company, and I mean, sometimes that's successful, or to get experience, and then and I just like that you didn't go down the pathway of like, don't do this, do that. It's follow God's will is the point of this. It's really this podcast is how do we follow God's will? How can we determine? We're not how do we determine, but like in our workplace, how do we follow God's will? It's follow His revealed will. And then try your really pursue after Him so you can find His secret will. This is really the point here.
Exactly. Exactly. Perfect.
All right. You know what, folks? I was really worried Lester was going to come in and throw a "Don't work at Enron." I know they're not in business anymore, and they were a terrible company, but I was just waiting for that line.
Don't work at Enron because they don't exist.
Yeah. Maybe get a real paying job. But I like this. I like where we ended here with I mean, we're all humans. We're all making mistakes. We're all sinners. And the point is, you're just pursuing after God. Where can we do that the best is really the question, right? How can I follow God's will? How can I pursue after God the best? And for a lot of that, we can't answer that for you.
Yep.
Like you can't call into somebody. You can't ask. I would say the best way to do that, if you're in a point in your life where you're like, I don't know what I should do. Should I work here? Should I go here? I would say get a job and then start to evaluate. Is there another job I could get that I'm more passionate about? Is there a job that maybe God's calling to me? And then ask people in your life who are like mentors to you or people walking alongside you, like, hey, can you pray for this? Like, I think I should be going here. I really want to go maybe start my own business here. Or I really want to like go here, but I'm just worried that I might just be doing this out of pure selfish ambition. Like, ask people to pray for you. God reveals what he wants through people in your life all the time. Read the Bible. Like, those are the two main areas where God will like reveal to you. It's like, hey, maybe I have you. I really would love you to do this, right? But I also just need to stress, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. I have nothing to add. I've ranted in and out. Lester, you've added some good points. Do you want to finish off with anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to be back next week with a little, how do you say it again? The planet? Kolob, is it?
Yeah, KOLOB.
Kolob. Talking about Christianity adjacent. So I think some of you may know where we're going with that. Others may be lost, but we'd love to have you back. As always, email testing123@springvale.org. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. Anywhere else?
A Stitcher and Podbean, and then
so
some
if you
other
use
Last
those,
FM. Yeah,
I don't know how to help you because I don't use Stitcher. Podbean. But Lester, awesome. Anthony, how do we sound? Giving us the thumbs up. All right, well, guys, we'll see you next week.